When most people think about a spiritual awakening, they probably think of someone doing yoga and meditating. I always envision like a monk sitting on top of a mountain and just meditating and maybe doing silent retreats or something. It's very peaceful, it's very nice, you're all enlightened, you're wearing crystals and flowy clothes. Yeah, well, for anybody who has actually gone through a spiritual awakening or is in the midst of one currently, then you already know that it's not like that at all. In fact, it's awful. It sucks. Spiritual awakenings are not fun. They're painful. So in this video, we are going to discuss some reasons why it can be a little painful and what we can do to make the process just a little bit easier. My name is Catherine. I'm an energy healer, spiritual coach, and nurse practitioner. If you want to work with me, you can go to my website at catherineglassman.com, or you can email me at hello@catherineglassman.com. The first reason why spiritual awakenings can be painful is because, honestly, the truth hurts. When you go through an awakening, it's like you're taking those rose-colored lenses off of your face and you see the world for what it really is. Or it's kind of like that day that you learned that your parents actually didn't know everything and they weren't right all the time. It's like that, except it's your life. You just start to learn that a lot of the things that you have learned over time, especially as a kid and growing up, being in the school system and being raised by your parents and things like that, that a lot of the things that you were taught actually aren't true. And this really can be applied to pretty much everything. Everything from what you've learned in school, that some things about history might not necessarily be true, things about politics and the way the political system works, the healthcare system and medicine, thinking that the government has your best interests at heart. I mean, you just start to learn that a lot of the things that you thought were real are not real. And a lot of the things that you didn't think were real are real. This is painful because it feels like a betrayal. I'm sure you've experienced a moment where you realize that someone that you trusted was actually lying to you, and just how devastating that felt. That's kind of what happens during a spiritual awakening. You just learn that these systems and these organizations and associations that you put a lot of trust in actually, for one, might not actually have your best interests in mind, or they might not actually know everything that they claim to know. But not only are you learning about the truth about different organizations in society, but you're also learning about yourself. You start to learn the truth about some of the things that you are bringing to the table. You're learning the truth about yourself and how you have lived an unconscious life for a very long time, and how some of your behaviors in the past have been probably a little toxic and have driven wedges between people. You may have projected your issues onto other people. You may have been very unkind and maybe disrespectful to other people and to yourself. There's just a lot of truths that come to the surface. And when it hits you all at once, it is very painful. And it just honestly sucks. I think one of the hardest things to experience going through a spiritual awakening is waking up to the fact that your reality is based on your own perception of everything. It's a reflection of your inner world. The relationships that you were in, the friendships that you had, the jobs that you worked, just the person that you projected yourself out to be in this world is a reflection of your inner world. So if you found yourself in really bad, toxic relationships, if you found that all of your friends were lying to you or were more like frenemies, you found yourself in jobs where they were really disrespectful to you and a bit of a narcissist, then you are starting to learn that you did play a part in some of those situations. Now, I'm not saying that every bad thing that happens to you is your fault, but sometimes we do attract certain situations because of our own energy. Our energy resonates at a certain frequency and we're matching up with similar frequencies. And so if you continue to find yourself in relationships that are super toxic, then I mean, who is the common denominator? It's you, or in my case, it's me. That sucks. I have had some problems with relationships and friends and things like that, and always feeling so victimized in that situation at the time. But then going through an awakening, I started to realize that I was the problem, that I clearly had some self worth issues. I didn't respect myself enough to say no to certain situations and to certain people. And because I didn't have that ability within myself, I just accepted certain behaviors from people. And the same thing can be said with a job or work. Like if I didn't feel that I was really worthy of a certain wage or a certain salary, then I would probably just settle for a lower wage or salary. But then later on complain that I wasn't making enough money or that I wasn't making the money that I felt that I was worth. But my words clearly were not matching up with my energy because somewhere deep inside of me, I didn't really think that I deserved it. Waking up to the truth that things just really aren't the way that you always thought they were is just painful in itself. Another reason why spiritual awakenings are painful is because you just straight up think you're going crazy. You're literally just questioning your own sanity because now there are weird psychic abilities that are turning on, your intuition is heightened, and you just know certain things about situations or people, and you don't understand why you know them, and other people can't see it. And so sometimes you don't have a way of validating the information that you're getting to be true. Because you can't validate this information on a regular basis, you really do question if you might be kind of going crazy. Like, why am I getting weird downloads about this certain person? Or why am I seeing figures in the corner of my eye? Why do I keep hearing voices? Why am I seeing colors around people? Of course, if you were to speak to somebody who's gone through an awakening, or if you spoke to like a psychic medium, they'd be like, oh, you're seeing ghosts, or oh, you're seeing people's auras, right? But if you're going through this and you have no idea what it is, yeah, of course you're going to think you're losing your mind. And then it doesn't help to try to speak to somebody about it and they have no clue what you're talking about, which further validates that you might actually be going crazy. So I'll tell you a story about the time that I looked crazy when I was in the emergency room. So I was working as a nurse in the ER. And there was a kid that came in, a 2-year-old boy, who came in for vomiting and fevers for 2 days. Okay. For kids, that's usually not a big deal. It's probably just a stomach flu, give them some anti-nausea medicine and send them home. It's usually not that big of a deal. Well, this kid came in and he seemed fairly sick, but mom reported that it was just vomiting and fever for 2 days. Me, I wasn't in the main ER. I was in the psych area, which was a completely different section of the ER. I was away from everybody else. I kept having to come in to grab certain papers or like equipment and things like that. So I kept coming in, and that's how I saw that there was a kid there. Now, at the time, I was the only pediatric nurse, okay? All the other nurses, they had worked with peds a little bit, but I was the only one who had exclusively worked in pediatrics for a few years. I would just go in and check on the peds patients, everything's fine, no big deal, and then go back to my section. I came back out and they were getting ready to ship this kid over to another hospital because he was being admitted because they couldn't really figure out why he was so sick. So right before that they were getting ready to send this kid off, he codes. And of course, now that this kid is coding, I'm part of the code a little bit. I just come in and make sure that, the fluids are running at a certain rate, like everything is going smoothly. I'm not running the code, but because I'm a pediatric nurse, like I should be there, right? Everything's going well, everything's going smoothly. I go back to my section, okay? Go back to my section, check on my patients, because you can't leave psych patients for a long time, right? I come back out and the code was unsuccessful and the kid passed away. As they're doing like the paperwork after that you have to do after codes, I started just watching mom. And there was a look of concern on mom that was really unsettling to me. She looked very worried, but she didn't look sad. It's very hard to explain. And I just kind of kept staring at her and I just felt a little unsettled by it. Couldn't tell you why, but I did. That was just an observation, okay? I leave to go to my section, and then I come back. And when I come back, the father is there now. And the parents were Middle Eastern, so I couldn't tell you what language they were speaking. But there was a way that the dad was speaking to the mom. and he had his hand gripped onto her like bicep. They were speaking another language, but the vibe that I was getting was something to the effect of, don't say anything. Now, again, this is just an observation and it's speculation for me at this point. But I'm really starting to feel unsettled and I'm starting to get a little suspicious of these parents now. And that's not exactly something that you just want to announce, especially after the kid codes and dies. Again, I leave to go check on my patients and I come back out and the coroner is there now. And the coroner is speaking to like an uncle, I think. And I'm just passing by, okay? And this is how you know that divine timing is real. As I walk by the coroner and the uncle speaking to one another, I overhear the uncle say, the parents are refusing an autopsy for religious reasons. And that was the moment that I knew that they had something to do with him dying. There was no doubt in my mind after that. Before that, it was like some suspicion. I didn't really feel comfortable with really solidifying my belief in that. But as soon as I heard that, I knew that they had something to do with it and that I needed to say something. So I go over to my charge nurse and I go over to the doc, and I had never worked with this doc before, but we all decide to do a debriefing. Now, in this particular ER, there were not a lot of pediatric codes. And so when that happens, it's very traumatic and we have to just run through the entire scenario to make sure that we did everything correctly. Okay. So we're all debriefing everybody that was in the code. And I mean, it was sad. There were a lot of nurses that were crying because that's not something that we were used to. I worked in pediatrics, and so I've seen those before. But you know, a lot of them had never been through that before. So it was really sad. And they're really upset. And a lot of them were questioning whether or not they did something right or wrong. They were like, did we do everything that we could? Like, did we run it correctly? And once it got to my turn to speak, I literally stood up and I said, we did everything perfectly. Okay. That code was ran flawlessly. So that tells me that there was nothing that we could have done to save him. But what I will tell you is that these parents had something to do with it. And I'm not going to rest until that kid gets an autopsy immediately. Everybody in the room was shocked by what I said, because that's quite an allegation to just make about somebody, right? Especially parents that's just lost a child. Like that's kind of out of line, right? But I stood firm and I had never done this before. And so this was another reason why it was such a shock, because I don't just say those kinds of things. I'm not really that outspoken. It's not unless I truly believe something. And so I'm fired up. Okay. Everybody knows it. Now I've changed the energy of the room. Like it went from being like somber to like kind of weird. And I could feel it and I knew it. So after the debriefing, the doctor came up to me and was like, listen, they're going to perform an autopsy. They're going to call me with the results. As soon as they call me, I will call you personally and tell you what they said. And I was like, thank you. I appreciate that. The next day, I'm working in the same ER, except I'm not in the psych section now. I'm in the main section with a group of patients. And the coroner called with the results. My charge nurse answered, and I hear her on the phone. And she's like, okay. Oh, fractured ribs. Are you sure that wasn't from CPR? Oh, okay, thank you. She hangs up the phone and she looks at me and she says, they found multiple rib fractures and a brain bleed. And she was like, you heard me ask if those rib fractures were from CPR. And they said, no, they were older. And it all just got silent. And I was like, now I was surprised, but I also wasn't surprised. I just kind of took the information in and I was like, okay. So after that, they sent me out to Recept, which is the reception area, which again is away from all of the patients, right? And so I'm recepting patients, I'm kind of doing like a triage and I'm by myself. Throughout the day, 5 people, including my charge nurse and the manager that was on that day, came up to me all on separate occasions by themselves to ask me how I knew. And one of them was even like, dude, you have like a dark gift. And I just had to tell them, like, I don't know, I just knew. So in those moments, When I see it, it looks very obvious to me, and I think that other people can see it, when really nobody can see it. I tell you this story because I looked absolutely insane this day. I looked like I was completely out of line, like I was just an awful person for even thinking to accuse these parents of doing something terrible to this child. And I turned out to be right. Now, I don't know whatever happened after that because it didn't matter for me anymore. I knew in that moment God was giving me information so that I can speak up about it. And I feel very protective over children. And so I knew that that was the moment that I needed to step up and say something. Because I said something, I did my part and I had to release it after that. And so whatever happened after that, I really don't know. Sometimes you are going to look insane and you're going to look crazy. But there will come a day where you will be validated and vindicated. Another reason why spiritual awakenings are painful is because it's isolating. Just like from my previous story, I felt very alone. I was the only person who spoke up and said what I said. And there was nobody else that, stood by me and said, like, yeah, I kind of suspect something too, or yeah, I agree with her. Nobody did that. And that's okay. I don't feel bad, but that's just one of many situations where I just felt completely isolated and alone. A spiritual awakening changes you and you start to see things very differently than everyone else. You don't see things the way that your friends do, the way that your family does, even the way that your partner does. And because of that, you just feel like you're experiencing life and reality alone. Eventually, you'll probably feel that you can't really share a lot of these things with your friends and family if you want to keep them as your friends and family. And so you just learn to be quiet or to just keep it to yourself. And that is very isolating because the best way to build intimacy with other people is to feel a sense of understanding. And if you feel like nobody really understands you or understands what you're saying, then it's a lonely journey to say the least. But you learn that this is a journey that you must embark on by yourself. Another thing that makes awakening so painful is that you can't force what you see and your new beliefs now on other people. You can't force them to see it. You can't force them to understand what you're trying to say or to believe what you believe. You might catch yourself becoming incredibly frustrated that they can't see the truth. By trying to force them to see it, the only thing that you're doing is creating an energy that highlights how different you guys truly are. It's forcing a wedge in between you two. And at the end of the day, if you try to force people to see things from your perspective, you're really, especially on a spiritual level, the only thing that you're going to look like is one of those religious people that tell you that your beliefs are wrong and their beliefs are right, and they're just trying to shove their religion down your throat. And nobody likes that. Nobody wants to be told what to believe. Nobody wants to be told that their beliefs are incorrect. What people want is the space to come to you if and when they are ready to do so. And it's actually more fun to just plant seeds, to just gently talk about certain things that you find fascinating and read their response. If they seem to be a little engaged or intrigued, then keep talking about it and just be open about it. If they seem to shut down or if they get a little triggered, then that is your sign to just let it go. You are going to come across people that are going to get triggered by your beliefs. And it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. But if you keep pressing their buttons, then it's just not going to be good for anyone. And you don't want to have that kind of interaction and energy between other people anyway. You want your interactions to be peaceful and neutral for the most part. But just having conversations where you're planting seeds of ideas, it puts the ball in their court and they can do whatever they want with that information. And you'd be surprised by how many people you can get to open up and to open their minds about certain concepts just by mentioning certain things here and there in a very friendly manner. Throughout the years, I've had so many people come up to me and tell me that they initially thought that I've had people tell me straight up that they thought I was crazy. But then it wasn't until like months later did they experience something that I was talking about. So then, of course, they had to come and tell me that they experienced something and that it was just like what I said. But at the time, they thought I was crazy. And, it's funny. Another reason why awakenings can be painful is because your physical body starts to change. Your physical body starts to become more sensitive to energies, whether it is with people or with food or drinks or an environment. Your energetic frequency is starting to elevate now, and everything that you were around before starts to become, their energy doesn't go lower. It's just that it's lower compared to your energy now. And so then it creates a dissonance. So when you start to interact with the older things that you interacted with before, it can cause like physical symptoms. Throughout my awakening, I learned that I really couldn't tolerate meat the way that I used to. Definitely can't drink alcohol the way that I used to. I dare not even think about drugs. I would probably die. I don't know. I used to microdose psilocybin or magic mushrooms, okay? I did that so I could wean myself off of antidepressants. I can't imagine being on antidepressants at this point. I know that my body would not be able to tolerate it. And on top of that, I don't think I can tolerate like a low dose of mushrooms now. I remember the last time I took a microdose of mushrooms, I was in Egypt. And holy cow, that place is powerful, packed with like ancient energy. And it's a powerhouse. It's crazy. It's definitely a ley line. Taking that one tiny little microdose of those magic mushrooms in Egypt threw me over the edge. And I was like, never again, never again. And I wasn't exactly like, if anybody knows about a microdose, you're not taking enough to have visuals or hallucinations or anything like that. The point is to just have like a slight change in mood. A microdose should be something so small that you can function throughout daily life. It was way too powerful. I couldn't do it. I now have a hard time being in public spaces for long periods of time. I do not like grocery shopping. I like going to the store, I guess, and looking at the items. And I even have a friend at the grocery store that I say hi to. He's like an elderly man. But other than that, like just the energy of a lot of people in one space is very overwhelming to me. And that's a bummer because I really liked concerts and I will still push myself. If there's, a certain concert that I want to go to and it's been a long time, I'll try to push myself. But I come home with a lot of energy and I don't like that. And the last thing that I want to mention about why awakenings can be painful is that you start to realize that your unconscious self may be a product of trauma. And even though a lot of people can understand that to a certain degree, when you go through an awakening, you're basically thrown into having to heal that. It's basically making you do it because you don't have any other choice. Because now that you know that your inner self is reflected in the physical reality around you, that if you don't heal that inner self, then you will forever have a reality that you are not happy with. Because you get downloads here and there about the life that you can potentially have and the fun that you can have, but you can't get there until you release some of the anger or the sadness or whatever other issues you may have. It's not fun to learn that you have a lot of work to do on yourself. It's so much easier to just blame your parents or to blame the people that you dated or whatever. But when you go through an awakening, you learn that you are the one who has to do the work now. And these changes don't happen overnight. So it's going to be a journey. The best way that I can describe a spiritual awakening is when when you wake up from a dream and it's a very vivid dream, right? So you're in the dream and then you're slowly starting to wake up. And when you wake up, you're in your room, you're looking at your ceiling, you see your bed covers, but you can still think about and recall the dream. So you're in this dreamlike state. You've got one foot in the dream world and one foot in this reality. That in between time is a spiritual awakening. Except when you're waking up from a dream, it is a very short period of time from when you're in the dream to when you're fully awake. But when you're in a spiritual awakening, it's like you're leaving your older unconscious self and waking up into a new and improved version of yourself that is co-creating with the universe. And this in-between state lasts for years. And you know how awkward and weird it is to be in that in-between state from a dream when you're just waking up, right? Especially if it's a very traumatic dream, or you dreamt that your partner cheated on you and then you're wondering if they really did cheat on you in this life. Like, it's a very confusing and very awkward and weird place to be. And so that is what it's like going through a spiritual awakening, except you're in that state for years. Like, you don't know what's real or what's fake, even though it's painful and it's isolating and you think you're going crazy. This is a very unique thing to happen. Not everybody will go through a spiritual awakening. The majority of people will not go through one. And so if you are going through one, then that means that you were chosen. You were chosen to go through this awakening so that you can change. And that once you have gone through that change, you will then assist the planet in going through its massive change on a global scale. That is a big deal. This isn't happening for no reason. None of this is an accident. You weren't chosen to just go through a painful process just for the sake of going through a painful process. You are going through this process to prepare you to become a warrior for this planet, for humanity. A spiritual awakening means that people are going to look to you for answers. They're going to be looking to you for guidance, because we're not exactly through this crazy turn of events right now. The planet is going through a massive shift, but we can't go into this shift until we get enough people to shift themselves first. The painful parts of the awakening are not going to last forever. There will come a time where you're not going to feel like you're going to need to have to heal all the time. Eventually, there will come a point where you will become and be the new version of yourself. And when that day comes, you will thank those painful times. You'll thank all of those situations, because without them, you will not have become the person that you will be. The thought leader, the way shower, the starseed, the spiritual leaders of the planet. You cannot become one of those until you go through the painful awakening. So if you are experiencing a painful awakening, then congratulations. You're part of a pretty cool club. This whole time you thought you were just this weirdo, but no, it turns out you are something magnificent. If you found this video to be of any use, then check out my video on mental health or mental illness versus a spiritual awakening. But with that being said, I hope you liked this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Consider subscribing, and I will see you guys next time.